Hi and welcome. I'm Liam Forde, founder and CEO of The Zone, and welcome to this fantastic seminar from the EMA. So, how to achieve happiness and productivity in the workplace. And I just want to give you a heads up that we've got a Slido for all your questions. So, you'll see that Slido QR code, you know how to use it. So, let's get on with the show. So, what have we got on today? Look, we've got six parts, just a little bit of an introduction, talk a little bit about the landscape, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the stress pandemic. And then 4, 5, and 6, I'm going to take you through some of the concepts that we use at The Zone. And you can take notes, or as you know, this will be uploaded into the YouTube channel. So let's crack in and tell you a little bit about me. So there's some sort of terrible photos of me. So if we start on the left, my family was from Motukaraka in the far north, and you see me there with my grandmother in Opunoni. We were gathering agar on the beach, and in those days, you gathered agar, you dried it, and you could sell it. The middle one is me in London, in Carnaby Street, where I started my first business. So I've been an entrepreneur. I've had 7 businesses. The largest one, that one was in London. I started. We had 600 staff. And the other one is me in Monaco doing my TEDx talk. And the final one was a few weeks ago when the NZATD, and I was a keynote speaker there kicking off. So that's just a little bit about me. 4 kids and a cat. And a partner who's, I was just discussing with Deborah here at EMA, who's also of Brazilian origin. So we have something in common. So it's really always cool to know that. So a little bit about us as a business. Like, we've been going for 24 years. I've personally worked in 38 countries around the world with hundreds of different organizations and thousands of leaders. And when it comes down to it, we always say, hey, look, this is all about people. And so it's really important to understand that your business is driven not only by technology and operations, but by people. And if you want to create an organization that's happy and productive, you need to look after your people. And as you know, it's difficult to find great people now. We have a skills shortage due to the COVID pandemic. And it's also difficult to retain them and keep them motivated. So it's really important that you understand some of these concepts that we teach. But first, what I wanted to do is introduce you to a topic which you may or may not know about. And this is about what we call the currency of attention. And attention, and your attention and your people's attention, is probably the most valuable currency that you have. And not a lot of people understand how attention works. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a tour on how attention works. And hopefully that will help you stay attentive during the workshop, but also to manage your attention post the workshop. So if you start off with attention, you've got to imagine that we start off every day with a sort of bucket full of attention. Let's call it our attention field or our attention span. We've got that. Most of that attention is free attention when we wake up in the morning. And healthy attention, you bring a problem into your attention field, you process it, you solve it, or you move it to the next stage, and then it comes out of your attention and you wait to pick it up next time. That's healthy attention. It's that process of in, process, and out. The problem is that some problems and some situations and a lot of distractions fill our attention. You know, particularly a lot of people I know get up in the morning and they get straight onto social media or onto their WhatsApp or their emails, and before they know it, their attention's full of stuff and they can't give attention to their family or to their health or to starting the day or to actually working a plan on how to work with the day. So that really starts to impact not only their happiness, because it's really difficult to be happy when you're overloaded, your attention's overloaded, and you start to feel stressed. And it's also really hard to be productive when you haven't worked out what are the most important things that I need to do today, and you're just dealing with the urgent rather than the important. So then what happens is you try and fit something else in, and it's going to be rejected. And normally what happens when people reject things is they say, like, back off, I can't take any more. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced that, which is you put the hand up and say, no thanks. And that's rejecting it. And that creates a ripple effect, of course. Or you start to displace another piece of really important information, and that's going to be what you call forgetting. So you're going to forget, you're going home, you forget where you put the keys, you forget what you're supposed to do today because your attention is just absolutely crowded with all sorts of other stuff. So I don't know how many of you actually experience that on a day-to-day basis, but that attention will create overwhelm. Now, you add on top of that some emotion or some charge onto those attention particles. So this now is something that's really important and really emotional. And soon your emotion and your attention is going to be not only you stuff, but it's going to be incredibly reactive and incredible stress. And so this is not how you want to start the day, end the day, or live your day. And if we talk about moving from free attention, so we have free attention, we've got high capacity, really high resilience at that stage. And as we move along that continuum, we end up with overwhelmed attention. And have you ever heard of fight, flight, freeze? Well, not many people know there's a fourth one. Everyone knows, the fight. So we get into conflict, or we flight, we run away from conflict, we avoid conflict, or we just freeze on the spot. So, people just become very unresponsive. Or you can do this thing called fawn, where you actually fall in love with your captor, like the Stockholm syndrome. So that sort of thing is like when you start to become things like a workaholic. So you start to fall in love with those things that are actually creating the most overwhelm or stress in your life. And this can be, pretty problematic. So that's the currency of attention. And it's really important to know how you can sort of work with this. So a couple of methods that you can actually work with your attention is try creating a to-do list and then tick it off one at a time. Now, it sounds pretty simple, but once you put down all of the things you've got to do on a to-do list or a mind map, you start to going to feel relief. Any unfinished projects you have will take up headspace until they're done. You can also do things like create boundaries around what you have as external stimuli. In other words, put your phone on silent, etc., and block space for meetings. And so that means that no one steals that valuable attention. Practicing things like mindfulness or breath work to train the mind and the nervous system is very helpful. Good night's sleep, etc. But one of the most important ones is also to make sure that you handle any of those unresolved communications that you need to talk to people about. So if you've got unresolved communications and incomplete communications, make sure you handle those. And that way you're going to stay more in the zone or more in that happy space than if you are overloaded with attention. So that's just a quick intro into the currency attention. So now that I've got your attention, does any of this sound familiar to you? So as you're listening, does any of this sound familiar? And you may have questions about it, so put them on the Slido. So let's make sure that we've got our full attention on what's coming next. So these are some of the things that we get told by our clients that are happening on a day-to-day basis inside their organizations. And maybe you can relate to some of these. Is it struggling to get people? Is it turnover? Is it struggling to engage them? Is it struggling to get the best out of them? Is productivity an issue? Is burnout or fatigue an issue? These are all things that are currently challenging our businesses, and understanding the concepts I'm going to tell you next will help you handle those. So let's look at the state of the global and local workplace. And this might be quite interesting for you. So if you look at the recent Gallup survey, and they look at the state of the global workplace, only 21% are engaged. Only 33% are thriving. 40% are experiencing daily worry. 44% experience daily stress. 21% experience daily anger. And 23% experience daily sadness. Now, this when you start to read this, you think, wow, the workplace is in serious disarray. And I think that's true, that we need to put attention on the workplace. We need to use our attention to solve our problems internally so that we can actually serve our customers. And actually we can make successful businesses. That's why we're here. So let's have a look at stress levels in New Zealand. 47% of New Zealanders and Australians report feeling a lot of stress daily. So that ranks us 4th globally in the world. Now, that's not a really good statistic. I mean, we're a beautiful country, but when you say, hey, we're 4th globally in the world as far as stress, that doesn't really bode well for inviting people here. Burning out in New Zealand. 11% of workers are burnt out at the most severe level of job burnout, and 20% are at high risk of burnout. That's 31% of New Zealand workplace, and that's really, really high. So we need to do something. Let's look at the stress pandemic. How is stress and well-being impacting our potential? You know, when you're stressed and under stress, you don't make the best decisions. You don't have the best relationships, and you don't have the best health. So if you think about decisions and relationships and health, these are pretty important for us to be successful in business, wouldn't you agree? So what is this performance, learning and stress curve? So if you look at the one on the left there with the green smiley face, this is the normal level where you get certain amounts of stress, puts you into that top zone of working. And you need a little bit of stress, a little bit of adrenaline to get you going in the morning. So that's fine, but when it gets too much and you start dropping down the curve, that's when the problems go. If you look at the one on the right with the red face, what you see there is that if a task is very simple, like maybe you're wrapping sandwiches or moving things from A to B, very simply, then stress, you can handle a lot of stress in your life and still do that task quite meaningfully. But as soon as the task starts to get more complicated, requires creativity, requires collaboration with others, and has a big ripple effect on customers, then you're in trouble. So it's really important to make sure that we're handling this performance, learning and stress curve, and that we take care of it as leaders and as business owners. So, you know, well-being and engagement are really intersect, and it's not just about the whole person. It's not just about the worker. So we can't just think of a worker or an employee as an employee. We need to think of them as a whole person, and they have lots of things going on in their life. And when we start to think of them like that, we can actually create more effective, happier, and more productive workplaces. Leaders are the champions of employee well-being, and there is a very positive or very negative ripple effect if you don't do that. And the research is finally caught up when you look at the Gallup research on employee well-being. But, you know, leave it to no doubt, sustained stress will create a very negative ripple effect on your business. And this is something that we really need to deal with. And this is why we created the Zone nearly 25 years ago. It's because, you know, I could see this burning platform coming, and I could see that individuals weren't thriving, and I could see it was just going to get worse and worse and worse as time went on. So I wanted to try and create better communities, better families, and a better world. So that's why we created the Zone. So let's talk about the Zone and the 3 golden rules. So let's move on to there. So what is the Zone? So let's talk about the human dynamic model. And if we were able to boil humans down into a couple of small, really key components, we would see that we have a being and a doing side. So what's in the being side? Well, in the being side, that's our internal landscape. So that's something that's inside of us that, you know, other people don't see or know. And that's about our values, our beliefs, our feelings. And this is really, really important that we understand these if we want to be effective human beings. On the doing side, that's all about our behaviors, our words, and our actions. And, these are two different domains, and we shouldn't confuse them. Now, what drives our being level, our values, our beliefs, our feelings? Well, that's driven by our heart. Now, as I said, I've worked in 38 different countries doing this presentation. And when I talk about, which part of you do your values and beliefs come from, everyone puts their hand on their heart all around the world. And what drives our doing? Our behaviors is driven by our brain. And how do we define success in our doing side of us, right? So what's the measure of success in our doing? I mean, how do you define success in your doing side of your work or your life? Well, of course, it's about your achievements and your results. So remember when we started the webinar, we talked about achievements and results. But what happens on the other side of it when we are talking about the being side? So when we talk about the being side, what defines success in our being side? Well, what do you think? So what do you want for the people that you love most? What do you want for the people that you care most? And that is what we call happiness and peace of mind. So in happiness and peace of mind, it's really important that we are not only happy and have peace of mind, but that we are achieving results. And that is the crossover point, which we call the zone. It's doing what you love, doing what you believe in, and really it's working and alignment with your values, for example. So making sure that your values are really, really at the center of who you are and what you do and how you lead your organization. But of course, when we're in the zone, as we say it, things like energy, excitement, you feel more alive, you feel more creative, time flies. So it's really that sweet spot that you're in. And they often call this the same way in sport. You're in the zone at sport. You just are in that sweet spot where everything seems to come together. But are you always in the zone is the question. And the answer is generally no. So what happens if we separate our head and our heart and we separate the two? And so we're not listening to our heart, or we're just listening to our head, or we're not listening to our head, we're just listening to our heart, and the separation between the two, the balance is destroyed. Well, we start feeling disconnected, discouraged, and eventually we will create a feeling of being dysfunctional. So things just won't work. And if you carry on with that dysfunction for any length of time, what's going to happen? Well, you get what we call dis-ease, or you get sick. So you imagine if you're out of the zone physically for a long period of time, what's going to happen? If your relationship is out of the zone for a long period of time, what's going to happen? If your business is out of the zone for a long period of time, what's going to happen? It's going to get sick or decay. And this is the human dynamic model or understanding about the zone. So super important for you as leaders and employers to understand your people in terms of their values, their feelings, their beliefs, and also to be very clear on what behaviors and actions that they need to do to achieve results. Makes sense, right? So now, what about the 3 golden rules? So what are these 3 golden rules that we talk about at the zone? Well, the first golden rule is sort of common sense, and that is get yourself into the zone. Now, when we say get yourself into the zone, this is your life, and no one else can live your life for you. You can't make someone else responsible for your life and for your happiness. Do you imagine if you're in a relationship and now you're making your partner responsible for you being in the zone every day, for your happiness every day? How is that going to work out? So you really need to take responsibility for getting yourself into the zone. So when they did research onto happiness, what percentage do you think they found was internal versus external? If I knew everything about you in terms of your income, your status, what stuff you had, etc., I could only predict 10% of your long-term happiness. 90% of your long-term happiness is an internal gain. Sure, you'll get happy if you buy a new pair of shoes or a new bag or a new car, but you know what happens. It fades off over time. The only way for true happiness is to have that inner game. And that's when you say, I need to get myself in the zone. I need to take responsibility for my health, for my learning, for my career, for my own well-being and my own future. And that's super, super important to take that responsibility. Number 2 is help someone else get into the zone. Now, this is a little bit of a secret here. So, you know how sometimes you wake up and you're just not in the zone. You know, things, I don't know, bad dream, bad night, or too much fun the night before. Now, when you see someone in your workplace, or a colleague or a friend or a family member that's not in the zone, you know, you've got a couple of choices. You can just ignore them and walk past them and say, oh, who cares? It's their life. Get on with it. Or you can choose to step in and help. And you can just ask them, hey, looks like you're out of the zone. Anything I can do to help you? You need a coffee, you need a walk. Should we have a chat? Now, maybe they'll say no. No, I'm all right. But the fact that you recognize they weren't in the zone showed them what? Exactly. What it showed them was that you care. And what sort of family, what sort of workplace do you want? What sort of team do you want? Do you want a team that cares about each other? Well, of course you do. If you want to get happiness and productivity, you need to know that people care about you. They've got your back. They look after you. They're worried when you're not 100%, and they want to help. And funny thing is, when you actually help someone get into the zone, you feel better. So even though you might be busy and you're like, wow, I've got too much to do, helping someone seems to unlock another level of energy in us. That's a truism that's throughout time. We like to serve. And the third golden rule is spend more time in the zone together. So when you're talking about spending more time in the zone together, that means make sure that if you're at work, that your meetings are in the zone. They're not like killing people with PowerPoint slides, boring. They're not like draining people's energy. They're not so long that people are falling asleep. You know, make sure that, every sort of 90 minutes or so, you have a bit of a stretch break. Make sure you check in with each other before you start the meeting and everyone's good. Make sure when you close the meeting that we're all clear on what to do. Really spend that time in the zone together with meetings. When you're out with your family, spend as much time in the zone as you can. When you're at the gym, spend a lot of time in the zone together with the people in the gym. So it's really, really important. Cool. So that's understanding what the zone model is. Now let's look at our next foundation model, and that is called the whole person model. Now this is where, if you remember earlier in the presentation, I said you need to treat people like whole people, not just like workers. So here's the whole person model. Now I'm going to use a couple of little stick figures to illustrate this. What happens is these are the modes that we operate with, communicate with, make decisions with, and that drive our learning. And learning drives growth. So let's look at what happens when we go into a lot of organizations. We find that there's one predominant mode that organizations operate with. And what do you think that is? I mean, we analyze their emails and conversations, and we talk to people. And we find that it's always about KPIs, what's the results, what's happening, what's doing, what's the data saying. And what this does is it drives people into their head. So then they feel like they're a bit like a head on a stick, and that the only value they really bring is, all this rational thinking and data analysis and stuff like that. And of course, that's not all of us, as we know. And what's another part of us that we know is like, what do we talk about when we're in the canteen or around the water cooler, or when we're on a Teams call with one of our colleagues? We're not just always talking about work or when we get home. No, we're using our heart, because the heart is how we connect to people. When we have a heart-to-heart with someone, that means we're going to have really deep conversation versus a head-to-head which is when we can start arguing about who's right, who's wrong, what data is right. This is the ego arguing. A heart-to-heart is really when we connect with people. That's how we connect, and that's all about, our feelings, our values, and what's really, really important. But we also, when I ask CEOs around the world, how else do you make decisions? You make decisions on the data, of course, which is great. You have a really great feel and connection with your customer through the heart, so you get the customer data. How else do you make decisions? And they say, well, we use our gut or intuition. And this is really, really important to acknowledge that. It doesn't mean to say you're going to make every decision on a gut feel, because, you need to follow the data and you need to follow the customer information and what's really making people feel good. But if you ignore the gut, you can sometimes ignore things that are really, really important. So it might be that you have all the data, you've got it all there, but something doesn't feel right. You just feel, I don't know what it is. Make time to express those, because when you express those thoughts and resolve them, you'll find that you have a better outcome for your decisions and your meetings. Now, tell me though, so we've got the head, we've got the heart, we've got the gut. I mean, how did humans get to the top of the food chain? What was it? What capability did we have that we used to get to the top of the food chain? And you say, oh, well, opposable thumbs or working together. And yeah, they're all true as well. But there's one part of our brain that actually is a very specialized area that helps us get to the top of the food chain. And what do you think that is? And we use it at work, but we don't often use it enough at work. And that is our imagination, which is all drives creativity, innovation, etc. And this is really, really important. Often we'll go into organizations, they'll say, oh, we've outsourced creativity to the creativity or department or the innovation department. And that means that, all the rest of us aren't creative and aren't innovative? I don't think so. So, make sure that you are using people's whole person ability, which is to think, imagine, blue sky. So make sure with your team you're having sessions not just on doing the doing. It's like, what could we do? What might the future hold? And this will start to re-energize you as a human. The other part of us that's really important is our action, and this is our hands and our feet. This is how we act. We get things done. And this includes things like play, and so it's really important that you acknowledge that we are beings that are made to move. So sitting behind a screen, 8-10 hours a day, not moving, is not going to be healthy for any of us. So if you have that sort of a role and you want to energize your people, make sure that they have regular breaks. Make sure that they're getting to move. Make sure that they have a standing desk or some way of getting their body moving and getting that blood flowing, because that will be really, really important. And make sure that they have, the right tools to make plans. You imagine, sitting in meetings all day. How do you finish the end of the day? If you're sitting in meetings all day, you might have talked about really good stuff, but do you feel energized? I don't think so. Well, no one I've talked to feels energized. I mean, sure, if the meeting was fantastic, great. But most of the time, it really just leaves you de-energized. And then the final part is being grounded, so having your feet on the ground. And this is about making a difference in the real world, creating a real world difference for your customers and your people, or the society or communities in which you're working with. And if you can work with people as whole people, so you acknowledge their imagination, their creativity, you acknowledge the fact that they have, the thinking capabilities, the planning, you acknowledge the heart, it's connected, the values, the feelings, you listen to what their gut's telling them and integrate that. You allow them to move, you've got action, you've got plans, we're not just meeting without any plans, and it's really making a difference in the world. Then you have a formula for what we call collective intelligence. So when you can get whole people in the zone, you unlock this thing called collective intelligence, and that unlocks energy. And if you think about your business like, these like energy sources, how can you optimize the energy for your human resources? And this is one of the ways of doing it, understanding your whole person approach. So if we look at the whole person approach, we can really harness our true potential by activating every element of that whole person. And when it's fully actualized, it energizes us, it connects us, enables us to really take on that learning advantage. And we know for sure that the world is changing so fast. We're always having to learn new things. And this is part of what I call, the sort of competitive advantage. And in the zone, we call that the collaborative advantage, like working together to create new things and also do things in new ways, maybe more efficiently, maybe with a better result. And so it creates this new and unknown possibilities through collective intelligence. And that's when the magic happens. So let me just dive a little bit deeper into collective intelligence next. So, when whole people are present and connected, you create this thing called collective intelligence. But, what is it? How do you define it? Well, you understand IQ. So IQ is like, the thinking intelligence, that native intelligence, whether it be, mechanical or whether it's numbers or verbal intelligence, you understand IQ. That's what they measure at school a lot. But we know that's not the end of it. And for leaders, the most, predictive of success is not just IQ, it's EQ. And EQ is emotional intelligence. And so emotional intelligence is about being able to understand how people are feeling, being able to work with their emotions, but also being able to manage and work with your own emotions so that you're not reactive, that you're open and happy to receive feedback, and they're open and happy to receive feedback. So it's a two-way thing. Then you have this sort of emotional intelligence and being able to work with their emotions. And then collective intelligence is, how do I get the best out of a group of people or an organization of people? How do I get the best from those people? And let me illustrate this by telling you a story. So this was in Spain, and I was working with a biotech business, and this was just before the GFC. And so the head office, which is based in the US, said, hey, GFC's come, we're going to have to cut the budget by 50% because they were a small country. They had about 300 people in that business. So it was a bit of a rounding error for the US business, which was multi-billions. And so the CEO, who's the guy at the front of the queue there walking, said, look, we need to do something and we want to do it in the fairest possible way. And I'm a bit afraid to talk to our leadership team, which is 45 people, and tell them the news. What do I do? And I said, well, the first thing you got to do is trust that your people are going to want to help solve the problem with you, not just be, like, hey, we've got a problem and it's down to me just as the leader to solve everything. No, that's not how you do it. You need to do this collectively. I said, give me 2 days with your team and we'll go off site and we'll solve it. And he said, well, okay, I'll trust you because he and I had worked together in Germany before. And so what we did is on the first day, we got everyone present and connected. We connected them to what the issue was. And, he revealed the issue, but asked everyone to be super confidential because we didn't want to alert everybody. And how are we going to do this with the minimum impact on our people and the minimum impact on our clients and customers and the maximum impact for our success? And so what we did is I designed a walking meeting, and we walked along the coast of the Costa Brava, and it was a 2-hour walk there and back. So we spent 1 hour walking to a beautiful Catalan restaurant on the beach, and I designed 5 questions to be answered on the way. And there's a special methodology for creating a walking meeting where everyone gets to speak to everyone about the questions. And thus we walked for the 45 minutes to the restaurant. It was a beautiful day, beautiful walk. And, embracing nature is a fantastic way to help solve problems because it really gets you into a different zone. And then we went to the restaurant. We had some tapas and some coffees, and we just didn't talk about the problem at all. We just shared and connected. And then I did a debrief. Okay, what did you learn on those 5 questions? And then what questions do we need to answer on the way back? So then we created 3 very big, deep questions on the way back, and we walked all the way back. We got back to the venue. Everyone went off for a shower because it's a pretty hot day, and we reconvened an hour later. And we sat around and we shared our experiences in small groups and then bigger groups. And by the end of that day, we had basically solved the problem and had a plan in place where the absolute minimum impact on employees, the absolute maximum positive impact on customers, and our success as a business. And it was a model outcome. The second day, we thought we were going to be doing problem solving. We didn't. We just did planning. So we actually walked away with a really amazing plan set for that business. So that's an example of using collective intelligence. And here's one definition. Collective intelligence describes the phenomenon that occurs when whole people are present and connected, working with emergence. Now, emergent means working with what comes up rather than having always just a set plan, and clear and aligned group purpose. So we absolutely knew what we were there for and, why we were doing this process. So it was, absolutely fantastic. So look, just in summary, get your questions ready. So let's sort of bring it all together and summarize how we navigate changes and thrive. So resilient, happy, and getting results. I mean, this is what we want. Getting our people in the zone is where happiness and high performance coexist. It's where exceptional results happen. Now, like I said, we're not always going to be in the zone, but imagine if you could move your business or your teams or even yourself, 10% more into the zone time or 20% more into the zone time over time, maybe 50% more. Think about the creativity, think about the performance uplift. And in those times, you can really move the business forward. So, we know that people are our biggest asset. We know that there are many, many external challenges and, that'll never go away. And so getting into the zone is more important than ever. Utilizing the whole person and collective intelligence to get there is absolutely essential. And you will find that you create exceptional and sustainable results. And great leaders, high-performing teams and thriving cultures are really what the results are all about. So it's really, really important. And many people sort of say, well, okay, so typically, how do you work with the zone? What's the methodology that you use? Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that the difference that we have at the zone is that we understand people and we understand business, and we're here to unlock the greatest potential of both. And, question to you is, what are you missing out on because of poor culture, team performance or leadership? I mean, what are you actually missing out on? You can see those little shout out buttons there. I don't need to read them for you, but it's pretty damning. Corporate culture is the only sustainable competitive advantage that is completely within the control of the entrepreneur. So this is within your control. You have the control in your own business and your own family to create this amazing culture. And if you do that and you understand the zone and collective intelligence and whole person, managing your attention, you're going to start to create some pretty amazing results. So we work in three main areas: creating exceptional organizations, and that's about creating this amazing, strong culture, which unlocks this creativity and collective intelligence. Exceptional teams, which is all about high-performing teams, that are really leaning into the challenges, and exceptional leaders. And that's the three areas that we really focus on. And if you think about, okay, well, what do we actually do? Well, it's all about, first of all, discovering what you need. It's then designing a program to fit that. So we're very about bespoke design, delivering on that, debriefing that and saying, okay, how do we do? Where are we at? And then leaning into some development with you or your people or your organization. So that's fundamentally what we do, using our really bespoke and quite unique methodology. If you want to hear from one of the people that I've worked with for many years, so this is Nick Reed, CEO of Vodafone Group. So Nick and I first met at Vodafone UK, where he was the CFO. And then we started working together. He then became the CEO of Vodafone UK, then the group CFO of Vodafone Group, and now the CEO of Vodafone Group. And you can read that quote there from Nick when we were working with him. Different clients that we've worked with around the world, and we have worked with so many different clients in different genres, from sort of automotive to finance, et cetera, startups, tech businesses, health businesses, biotechs, fast food, anyone who really wants to get into the zone and understand this process. For those of you that want to understand a little bit more about this and rewatch it, you can watch my TEDx talk, which is my TEDx talk from Monaco. And what we've got on, if any of you want to do a free personal values discovery tool, we'll put that in the chat, link in the chat for you to understand your values. And it's super important to understand your values to kick off this work. So understanding your values is really, really important. And, often when I do workshops, I'll say, okay, how many of you understand your values? And maybe only 20% of people will put their hands up because they've never thought about it before. But once you understand your values, then you can start to change your life. Then you can start to make more values-aligned decisions. Then you can start to really make those decisions that are going to be aligned with your values, your company's values, and your customers' values. So, that's really, really key if you want a successful life, if you want high well-being and high performance. And finally, you can connect with us any way you like, and obviously through EMA. And I know you've got some questions which are coming through, so I'll be happy to answer those questions as they come through. And so remember, you've got the Slido, and thanks very much. So what have we got here? So a lot of people want to know a little bit more about attention. So one of the things that we need to understand about attention is that when our attention is full, we're going to get a highly stressed response. And, this is going to be unhelpful. So how do I know when my attention's getting full? Well, you're going to know because you'll start to feel agitated, and you'll start to feel like, the world is coming in on you rather than you're going out into the world. So that's one of the ways that you can tell your attention is getting stressed. And a couple of things that happen really with attention is there's two things that really trigger your attention. That is, if you've ever had a transgression, now what I mean by a transgression is that you've done something against your own moral code. So you know you've done the wrong thing. And there's a very quick fix for that, which is you apologize, and that usually frees up your attention. But also you might want to do something extra to make up for the fact that you had you did that thing that you weren't really proud of. So that's really cool. And the other thing that happens a lot is trauma, which is an external thing that actually happens to you. And it's really, really important to understand that if you've had something happen to you externally, then that's like fixing your attention and really making it impossible for you to like stop thinking about it. There's a couple of things you can do, whether it's mindfulness, and if it's not shifting through mindfulness and you can't take your attention off it, then I'd suggest if it's real trauma, you can go and find a therapist. It's really, really helpful for you to get that sort of professional help. So, okay, what else have we got here as a question? What do you think the biggest challenge leaders are facing at the moment? Okay, great question. So what I've seen around the world, not just in New Zealand, is change. So I think the biggest challenge for all leaders at the moment is, how do I deal with change? Whether that's like, for example, we're facing in New Zealand or all around the world, which is these recessionary pressures. So, for example, money's harder to get. A lot of startups are struggling to find funding. A lot of them are saying, hey, it's too hard. So how do I deal with change? And that means not only in my own business, but maybe I have to exit my business. Maybe I have to find another role. So it's all around change. So a lot of the time when we're working with organizations and leaders, we're helping them handle change. And because we understand people and understand business, we understand the change agenda. And as you know, there's two elements of change. There's the process of change, which you need to be very clear of. And if you think of that as like what the head understands, the steps that you need to go through for change and great communication, etc. But there's also the human element of change. And when humans are faced with change, because we're designed to be creatures of comfort and to seek comfort, we don't want things to change. So what happens is that initially we'll go through a change resistance mode, but if we can help the people through that, remember the 3 golden rules, help someone else get in the zone, then you move them through the resistance part into the positivity, and that will then help them move on to understanding and working with the change. Hope that answered your question. Okay. How do we balance staff who may be overly emotional with those who aren't? Okay, great question. So what I'd suggest that you understand is what's called the drama triangle. So the drama triangle is from Stephen Cartman, and in the zone work we call it the trap. In the drama triangle you have 3 poles. Now if you think about a blockbuster movie, what are the blockbuster movies? Well, there's the villain who's done this and terrible thing, and then you have the victim who's the victim of that terrible thing, and then the rescuer or the hero or heroine that comes along and gets the villain and then turns the villain into the victim. And this is what happens, and with humans we love this drama triangle. So the only way to actually break the triangle, so the victim is saying, oh, I'm being preyed upon by the aggressor or the victimizer, and I can't do anything about it, I'm a victim. Now, if you just come in and rescue them, you are just agreeing with the fact that they can't fix it. And that's not going to be very empowering or very motivating for the victim. It's not going to change the victim's mindset. So instead of becoming the rescuer, you need to become the coach. So you need to step in with the coaching and saying, okay, great, so this has happened to you, this drama is going on, what are you going to do about it? And what can you do about it? And then work with them and coach them until they become more empowered and more confident and competent at dealing with whatever's coming in from the external world, whatever they're creating the drama about. So don't rescue them. Always coach them and grow their competence. That's really important. Okay, what else have we got? How do individuals, my leaders, change the mindset? How do I motivate my leaders to change the mindset? Sorry. Okay, so how do you motivate leaders to change their mindset? Well, you may know of the great work of Carol Dweck on growth mindset, and where she looked at the difference between how children in schools approach problems. So some children would approach the problem and go, that's too hard. And some would approach it with gusto and go, wow, I love the challenge. So you've got to get your leaders to lean into the challenge. Now, if I go back to that previous comment about the drama triangle, your leaders are in that drama triangle or trap. So they're seeing the challenges as the aggressor, and they're the victim of that. You've got to coach them to get them across the line and seeing the challenges as challenges, not as opportunities, not as like things that are going to be too hard. And the other really important thing is to understand the neuroscience of behavior. We need challenges to actually be at our best. So if we don't have challenges, we will become less resilient. So we need the challenges. Now, if you want to look up some great work on flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and you'll understand that there is this thing called the flow channel, and you have to have the right amount of challenge and the right amount of skills to get you into this flow channel or this zone, space of the zone. So if you don't have challenges, you'll just become very, very mediocre. So it's really important to understand what that leader wants to achieve in life so that they can step up their game. Hope that helps. Okay. Do I have to spend too much money to apply all of these tips? Absolutely not. You don't have to spend anything because you've just learnt all the secrets on this webinar. So, the main thing is if you feel like you would need to spend money on an external consultant, think about it another way. What education could you do to lift your game? What could you do to elevate your skills so that you can become an amazing people person? And I'm sure that, there's some great courses on EMA, and there's great courses that you can have if you look on YouTube about improving your emotional intelligence. And even just a small increase in your emotional intelligence and working with people, knowing how to lead with a facilitative hat on rather than just telling people what to do or command and control, even a small increase will see that you can actually create fantastic results for, very, very small amount of money. So I hope that helps. So I think we're at the end of our session. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll certainly be looking forward to hearing your feedback. So thanks very much, and ciao for now.